Welcome back, geniuses. The new Oceans campaign pack is live and is bringing a whole pile of new features with it. We have our new genius who is bringing a brand new campaign. We have a new map to be able to play on, new henchmen to recruit, new loot items to pick up, a brand new room type, and engineers to play around with. The new minions are the engineers type, but the most fundamental and farthest reaching change that this DLC has brought is a whole new system added on to base building where you need to manage the temperature in your lair. If you are interested in seeing what this new campaign is all about, then I have streamed my Let's Play of the entire playthrough for Polar's campaign on hard mode. You can check those videos out. They are up on the channel, but today we are going to be diving into and experimenting with the temperature system here in the game. We're going to break down the fundamentals of how this system is implemented and then look at some common setups that I have found to be beneficial, keeping our minions in the comfortable range where they actually receive a buff and being able to keep them away from the negative impacts that will come around if they are too cold or too hot. Keeping your minions at a comfortable temperature will mean that they will lose morale and smarts more slowly, while if they are too cold or too warm, then they will have decaying stats just passively as they are walking around in these extreme temperatures. Items will display what temperature they are at. There will be no display if they are at the perfect neutral temperature. It'll just be blank. But the hottest temperature that is considered melting has an extreme adverse reaction for them. They will decay their durability very quickly compared to items that are kept at any of the other temperature levels. If you have a room of items that are all at the melting point, then it's going to be nearly impossible for your techs and engineers to be able to keep up with running repairs on these guys. They're going to be spontaneously combusting, giving you an enormous headache. So putting in these industrial air conditioners and monitoring the temperature levels all across your base is going to be important, not just for your minions' performance, but also for the well-being of your items as well. Let's dig in a little deeper. I have prepared this wide open room to be able to do some testing to demonstrate exactly how this temperature system works. Now, there are going to be some items that will produce heat. There's going to be other ones that have no interaction, and then you don't get the heat map brought up at all during the building menu. The only items that are going to decrease the temperature around them are going to be your air conditioning unit, your industrial air conditioner, and I guess technically Absolute Zero, Polar's new super weapon, but that uniformly decreases the temperature all across your lair, and it's a more nuanced condition that I'm going to talk about in a second. Most of the items that interact with the heat map are going to be producing heat. This just intuitively makes sense. So no longer can you build just rows and rows of fusion generators with no cooling systems and expect them to be okay. Let's build these two fusion generators right next to each other and be able to run some tests on the heat well that they are producing. There we go, the two right next to each other, they are considered hot. They're not quite at melting yet. If we added any more right next to them, they probably would hit the melting condition. Now let's see how the other items can interact with this heat zone. Before we start experimenting, we're going to use these little potted plants for reference. I'm placing them right here at the edge of the heat map. So here we get to see the full spectrum. Dark blue is going to be cold, light blue is chilly, the pale white is the true neutral, the perfect sweet spot, and then the light pink or light red is warm, fading into hot, and then a dark red, which we don't see here, would be the full melting temperature. The first thing that we want to test here is how walls interact with the new heat system. So we're going to lay out a little set of boundaries for our fusion generators, and then we're going to speed things up for the minions to come in, start constructing these, and see the impact on the heat map. We can actually select one of these generators and be able to see the heat map change in real time, which I really like how robust that system is. So it's not static, and you can like click in and click out. It does real-time updates, which is very nice. And as we see here, with this portion of the wall fully finished, we see that walls have an absolute insulating coefficient. There is zero heat transfer through the walls. We're going to the cold, that is as if there was no interaction with the room. This is the room's default here on the Arctic layer, and then we have a very hot down here within the generators. We also see something very interesting in that the system is actually very robust. The fusion generators, just because these walls are insulating, doesn't make them produce less heat. And so they are heating up this small space just the same amount, and there's actually more heat spilling out of the openings. We saw here was the limit of the heat map before, and now it is going out twice as far into the rest of the room. We're going to move our potted plants once again to the edge of the new heat boundary, and then we are going to place down two doors at these openings to be able to see how the doors interact with the heat map. we'll place down one normal and one reinforced just to be able to see the range of doors, not expecting the laser one to be any different than these that we place in. Now, doors are tagged as items, and other items don't have any insulating coefficient. If we turn over here to the barracks, I have one lone space heater, and it's right up against the edge of these the set of lockers, but it has a perfectly symmetrical heat map radiating right around it. It gets a little bit different as it extends, and you've got walls and other blockades, but right around it we see it's perfectly symmetrical, and that means that these lockers are not preventing any heat from passing directly through them. With the doors in place now, we can check again on our heat map, and we see they are not doing anything to affect the heat. So they are also considered to have zero insulation, which is, it's kind of interesting to me that they would be completely open in that, but we see that the heat map is coming out to the exact same position that it had been before the doors were in place. We've got our pots marking out the extremities. I actually wish they had given us an insulated door that would interact with the heat map, but that is not the case. If you have just an opening in your wall or you choose to place a door there, it is only going to impact the speed of minions and agents passing through. It is not going to interact with the heat map at all. The heat system has been added to all Geniuses and all maps, not just Polar and the Antarctic map, as long as you have the DLC enabled. So we see here on the tropical islands, they actually start in the warm zone. All the areas are warm by default. So really all you are going to be doing is placing down your air conditioning units and your industrial air conditioning units to be able to cool off rooms that have heat producers inside them. And otherwise, if you have rooms with all items that do not interact with the heat map, you can just leave them as they are, and they're going to be perfectly comfortable for the minions to be inside. This means you have a much more simplified interaction with the heating system on any of these other maps. So for the rest of the discussion, we're going to go back to the Antarctic map and the Polar campaign and talk about layouts over there. Here in Antarctica, all the rooms start cold or chilly, and if you're playing Polar, and as you progressively upgrade Zero, your new Doomsday weapon, they are going to get colder all across the map. Early in the game, I found success mixing workrooms, cafeterias, along with power production and vault to be able to have space for the power production and the control room items to be able to disperse their heat and warm these other services and other rooms to be able to keep the minions comfortable while not packing these items too closely together to be able to hit the melting point. If you don't want your whole base to look like this hideous hodgepodge of different rooms all together, then you're going to want to build your items with enough space in between them to be able to fit in temperature controlling units. In some rooms this is relatively easy, such as in the training room here. You want to be giving yourself space anyway to place down the decor items that will slow the smart strains of your minions who are training, to be able to give them that extended training time and not having to break off quite as frequently. So now you can just try and remember to put down a space heater right next to the yoga ball. If you want to have more central hub items, such as the furnace, providing temperature control for a larger area, do remember that you have the different settings for any of these items. So if you need to crank up the heat as the campaign progresses, you are free to be able to do so. And if things are getting too hot or to the melting point, you can always tone them down a little bit if you've placed them fairly close together. In other places, such as hallways, it's also pretty easy to be able to fit in space heaters, and maybe you can give yourself a friendly reminder that you should probably be putting down fire extinguishers alongside, just for any mishaps that happen to come about through any of your quests. Otherwise, in zones that you want to heat up, such as the cafeterias, you can place space heaters in between the cafeteria tables, around the barracks and the minions' beds. You can get space heaters on the edges around a number of beds to be able to keep them at comfortable temperatures while they are resting. It is also critically important to be able to control the temperature in your submarine bays, because these quests to go out and hit the Jaws territories require a lot of minions. And as the minions line up and wait to be able to go out on this mission, if the room is too cold, then they will be consistently losing morale. If they consistently lose morale down to a critical point, then they will want to go and nap to be able to restore their stats, and they will actually break away from the mission and go off back to the barracks. And then you can end up getting caught in this endless cycle of minions breaking away. They're losing stats faster than they can get all the minions required to be able to go and fire the mission, and they'll just end up waiting around until you bring in these temperature controls. The two zones where you're going to be producing the most excess heat is going to be in the control room with your advanced radio repeaters, your radio consoles. Your intel generating items are also going to be generating at least a little bit of heat, and then also your power production rooms. These advanced radio repeaters actually give off a lot of heat, and so I've found success with two different layout options. One is spacing them out enough to be able to get 2 industrial air conditioners in between, and then depending on the exact situations and your progress through the main campaign, because as you progress through the main campaign, your entire layer is going to get colder and colder. You can turn down the temperature on these industrial air conditioning units at the very end, but for most of it, you're actually going to need both of them running on high to be able to keep these from being too hot or even melting. You can also go to a layout like this where you leave space in between, and to be able to keep this room in a legal buildable way, you have to fill in the middle with dirt actually, and that's going to provide a little bit of insulation, which is interesting. It'll direct the heat more away to the other portions, the outside portions of the room, but anyway, you're able to put 4 air conditioning units around. These are just the tiny units. The advantage here is that these little guys do not consume any power, any additional power. The advanced industrial units are going to consume 2 power each, which is pretty minor. It's pretty minor. It's very affordable to be able to put those down, but it's still something, and across an entire room it is going to add up. Whereas these guys, they take up a little bit of space, but they don't require any power whatsoever. As we look at power production, we've got 2 different layouts depending on what level of generators you are using. If you are using the nuclear generator, so this is the middle option, then you can get away with this kind of staggered build where you go 2 next to each other, then a single one with industrial air conditioners in between and just 1 on either side, and then I've kind of spaced them out in a bit of a checkerboard pattern. You could probably get away with slightly different configurations, but this is what I have found to be pretty successful, and it will keep them at just warm or hot and not hit melting. And this layout is still fairly space efficient, so I do like it a lot. Once you go up to the fusion generator, then you're going to have to step up your air conditioning game, and so you're going to want 2 industrial air conditioners on either side, but you can still use this same style of 2 generators right next to each other, going up to 1, 2, 1, etc., as long as you want the row to go, and then just fit in as many air conditioners along the side as you possibly can. As another option for packing your power producers in together, you can use the absolute insulating effect of walls to be able to build a tight configuration such as this, with walls marking off the pairs of generators. These guys over here are just going to be hot. They're not actually going to hit melting, and then you can leave little gaps. You want to hook your walls all the way around the generators as much as possible, so then you are creating a pseudo heat shield to protect them from the heat being generated by the generators that are right next to them, and that is what keeps them from hitting the melting level. Now, a configuration like this is going to be projecting heat very far out into the room next to them, so you get a comfortably habitable zone right over here where you could have, say, services for your minions, and then you have a very hot region right here that if you don't want to add any of the air conditioners, you could use to be a portion of your vault. The money doesn't care what temperature it is as long as it's not melting, so that the durability is going down. So you could go for a zone of vault right next to it, or if you do want to have some more active temperature control, you're not going to be able to hook your heat shield around as much, but then you can place in your industrial air conditioners, and here you can see the projection of heat is much more minimal, and this entire zone is going to be considered warm, which is going to be a comfortable temperature for your minions. So you can have your minions working right up next to these power producers, or you could have another row of power producers right there and not suffer any consequences of hitting melting. The advantage of using this while you are spacing out your generators a little bit more, and you have to plan just a little bit more with the placement of the walls, but you are building significantly fewer industrial air conditioners to be able to regulate this kind of configuration. Here we see we have 1 industrial air conditioner for every 2 generators. In the previous setup, we were doing 4 industrial air conditioners for every 5 generators, and then in the repeating zone it actually gets even less efficient than that. You're going to have to turn to the engineers to be able to get more advanced temperature regulating options. So if we go to the engineering menu, we have this brand new tech tree. Trust me, it's not quite as overwhelming as it might seem at first. In these zones up top, we have the progression of improved temperature controls both for hot and cold. So some of the first research we are able to get is the industrial air conditioner building, and then also the furnace to be able to produce more heat. Then we have thicker uniforms and underfloor heating that is going to lower the impact of low temperature on your minions. Very nice to be able to pick this up so that you don't have to be as precise in regulating temperature across the entire lair. You're still going to want to give effort to this in important hub rooms where a lot of your minions are to be able to get improved performance, but you don't have to be so picky about every single hallway being the correct temperature. And then for the heat, you have antiperspirant and ceiling fans to be able to reduce the impact of high temperatures on your minions. As a final point, I want to remind everyone that if you are playing the Polar campaign, as you hit specific breakpoints in the main campaign, using Zero, your Doomsday device, is going to lower the temperature across your entire base to unbearable levels, especially by the end. So you're going to want to be careful. Your temperature controls that you set up at the beginning are not going to be sufficient as you continue to progress. You're going to want to make sure that you give yourself space for even more furnaces, more space heaters to be able to crank up the temperatures as you hit the very end. That is all the fundamentals of the new temperature system here in Evil Genius 2. Let me know in the comments how you guys have been enjoying this edition. I think it's one of the best parts of the DLC and have been really enjoying the new take, the new way that you have to think about your base building layouts to be able to control the temperature. And I feel like the balance is pretty fair in terms of getting the buff if your minions are in the comfortable temperature, and then you have the different debuffs and draining stats if they hit either extreme. There's plenty more Evil Genius 2 content coming around the horizon, so subscribe to the channel if you want to make sure that you see when those updates and videos end up coming out. Until next time, thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.